One of the attributes of trees that we often talk about as being important is the vigor of a tree. Tree vigor is a measure of growth efficiency. So for a given amount of leaf area, how much wood can that tree grow? Vigor is important because it's a way to characterize how a tree responds to different stress events. A tree that has good vigor is going to be more resilient and be able to respond to stress events. One of the ways that I've been monitoring vigor on these trees that maple producers could do anywhere is I've marked this line at DBH, the diameter at breast height, and I measure tree diameter every year. From that tree diameter, I calculate basal area in one year and basal area in another year. Then I have that increment, the difference in basal area, and I measure that as square inches. I convert those square inches to a ratio based on the original diameter measurement, the original basal area, which was 2017. So I have this relative change in wood volume that's accumulated based on how I've thinned some trees versus other trees. When trees photosynthesize, they produce sugar. The sugars are converted into starches. And all of these compounds are really about 50% carbon. So when we think about how a tree allocates that carbon, just like you have a family budget, how do you allocate your money? The tree has priorities where it allocates that carbon. So the most important thing from a tree's perspective is to produce leaves and to produce roots. So if a tree is under severe stress, it has a very poor growing season, it's only going to allocate carbon to leaves and to roots. If it's a good growing season, if a tree is vigorous and growing well, then it goes further down that line, it goes into storage tissues, and then finally towards next to the last is the accumulation of wood, and then finally reproductive structures, so flowers and fruits. So if a tree has good volume growth, a good increment of wood, that means that there's enough carbon that's left over from leaves and roots to be able to allocate it to wood. What I found was that the trees that I thinned more aggressively that had two-sided release and three-sided release, particularly upper crown class trees, those trees had higher indices of vigor and also had higher production of sap. So the volume, the gallons of sap that were produced by the trees that had higher vigor, that had been given more sunlight, was greater than the volume of sap that was produced by trees that had not been thinned. Interestingly, we had a fairly significant drought in 2020, so last growing season. When I look at the growth of the trees that were thinned and the vigor of the trees that were thinned, the trees that had four-sided release did better than trees that had three-sided release, did better than trees that had two-sided release, and so on. So it was a straight line relationship. More sides free to grow, better growth during a drought. So what we'll be able to learn after this 2021 sap season is how that growth in 2020 correlates to sap volume and sugar production in 2021. So vigor is important. It's important beyond just sap production and syrup production. It's important because it ensures the sustainable long-term health of our trees. These trees are the greatest asset that we have as maple producers, and there's no reason why they can't produce for you and for your children and for your grandchildren and beyond.